Hello everyone, so I'm Thierry Fautier, I'm the Managing Director of Your Media Transformation. Some of you know me from LinkedIn, but some others from real life experience. So I'm very happy first to present this future of TV network. First, we have that at the Connected TV World Summit Conference. I'm quite happy to be able to share with you our passion to scale the video delivery. So first of all, I want to mention this is going to be mostly talking about what we call the data plane, so media workflow. And this is a bit different from the control plane, the CMS, the device management, the DRM, which is also having its own challenges. So we are going to talk about a lot of things, and I wanted to stage the conversation today. So first of all, I want to introduce my panelist, Diego Ghibellino, Senior Program Manager at Telecom Italia. We have Juliana Oprescu, Principal CDN Architect at Sky. We have the famous Xavier Leclerc, who is basically, he lives here also, so London. And then we have, so of course, Xavier at Broad Peak, Vice President Business Development. Then we have Brendan Hall, who told me he's not from London, but he works at BT still. Director of Device and TV Group. And then last but not the least, Alexandre Pogam, listen to the title, Senior Director, SaaS, Business and Global Strategic Account Development at Harmonic.
Still on.
Okay, this was a joke. We are friends. So basically, to set the stage for our conversation today, I wanted to share with you a few topics. So OTT scalability is a hot topic in our industry. I don't know if you followed what happened in the Oscars. Did somebody watch the Oscars streaming? So basically, Hulu was showing some limitation, which is very different from the Netflix limitation. One is about sign-in provisioning. One was more about cache scalability and ISP connection, and that's why we have ISP operator here. Second, you have heard about regulation, net neutrality, and one of the toughest regulation we got is when Thierry Breton, another Thierry, pick up his phone and call all the different content providers, say you need to stop UHD streaming during COVID. That's what we call the hardcore regulation. Then the CDN market, you have already in the news, HIO going bankrupt, but newcomers, CDN 77 coming, Quilt, new kid on the block, multicast migrating from IPTV multicast migration from multicast to unicast is also going to increase the traffic. DTT switch off, I cannot skip the topic, so BBC has said that by 2030-ish, there will be no more DTT transmission. It will be all IP. So that's why we have BT here to explain, and we had BT before explaining us how it's going to happen. How to scale the OTT services. This is the billion-dollar question. I'm going to give you a few cooking recipes. First, you need to control how you are going to accept new subscribers, sign up and sign in. Then you need to know how you are going to stream in efficient way, compression, CDN throttling, network architecture, deep caching, multicast ABR, peer-to-peer, we're going to address all that. And of course, the latest audience I wanted to share with you, so I was quite interested when I look at my notes. Super Bowl 2025, 27 million at peak, at UHD resolution, this is 400 terabits per second. So if you want to know what is scaling, check what happened in the US. You will be excited by the numbers. So CDN diversity, last word I want you to remember, public CDN, ISP CDN like Sky, Telecom Italia, content provider CDN like Netflix, DAZN, Disney, multicast ABR, what Broadpeak is doing, peer-to-peer, we'll have somebody in the room that will probably have questions. So I'm going to stop here for my lecture, and I'm going to sit and start with the first question. What have you deployed in your network to manage financially and technically the growth of OTT traffic in your network? I will start with you, Diego, since you have, it seems, some popular content on your network.
Yeah, thank you, Thierry. So, TIM, since a long time, has worked in partnership with well-known OTT providers, and in particular delivering in Italy premium sports content. So, as you said, there are issues with the growth of OTT, but the real issue is the growth of the peaks that OTT services basically deliver, in particular for sports. So we basically defined a strategy that put together different tools in order to cope with those peaks, because we cannot, let's say, over-provision the network and the capacity based on those peaks. But we need to react and be clever using different tools in order to cope to peaks that happens today, in particular with sports events. So for a limited amount of time, or even on a geographical, really limited basis in terms of cities or region, there might be peaks, and we have to deal with that. We worked, as I said, with several OTT providers. We deployed an in-network CDN owned by ourselves and evolved internally that is used for our subscriber, but also for other, let's say, subscribers with other connectivity by OTT providers to deliver their content. This CDN is in depth in our network, so much closer to the final users than the usual global CDN. It is providing additional value. The other strategy is based on the multicast ABR. So basically, we reused and adapted a multicast network that was already in place in our network across our country, and we used that to deliver OTT content in an efficient mode, in particular, of course, for sports events and live events. We also deployed, as most of the ISP has done, vertical caches for specific OTT service providers. This is something that we are limiting today because we don't see that as a sustainable model in the future. So it's not scaling. We cannot cope and support several different OTT providers with their own vertical caches inside our network. What we want and we are trying to achieve is an horizontal solution that will work for all.
Good luck with that. Okay, Brendan, since you also have some special recipe in your network for those who were not attending the 2 p.m. presentation.
So much like Diego, we work with content service providers, we work with third-party CDNs who have deployments deeper into our network. Colin put up a graph earlier without any numbers on it. I think the recent spikes on a match night, we're comfortably streaming over 30 terabits per second of content. And at the moment, it's about scaling the network and the CDNs to cope with those spikes. But the secret sauce, the magic of Maud is something, so innovation is the other thing that we're looking to. And it's about looking at the entire ecosystem, so also some of the things that were being talked about in the last panel on sustainable streaming, the efficiency of codecs. You know, a small gain in a codec can make a massive difference when you're streaming to millions of customers. Yeah. So it's really about looking across the piece, along with the innovation from our own research labs on Maud. Talking
about codec, can you tell us which is the most popular codec when you stream live sports? Is it H.264? HEVC?
It depends on the content and the provider and which codec they're working with, so it's kind of hard to pick and choose. Okay. It depends.
Okay. Uniana, since you are also Sky, but ISP, not Sky content, very different. Can you share with us what your thoughts are on improving the streaming performance on your network?
So I'll talk about what we have already in place. We, unlike TIM, so Telecom Italia or BT, we do not have an IPTV network. So traditionally, Sky is distributed broadcast over satellite. So that means the network is not multicast enabled at the moment. So there is no secret sauce. What we've been doing is, as you would call it, a brute force approach, which is do more unicast with deeper caches. And we're spreading the peaks across more suppliers, more providers. And the ideal setup for us, for example, for serving third-party content into the Sky broadband network will be to try and bring on board as many content aggregators as we can, so platforms that are not single-tenant. We like to see steady-state use of what we deploy on net as caches. We want to make good use of space and power in the data center. So we will be looking at focusing more on people who bring peaks more frequently, not just a random peak once a month, because then that's infrastructure that's not getting used as much as it could be. So we will be doing more of the same until something breaks and we hit that inflection point when we have to do something different.
Okay, so question for you. When you say you are doing the brute force approach, is it something that can be scaled on demand, or you need to install new servers this time you have a new peak?
It doesn't scale on demand, but the growth has been constant. So this year's peak will become next year organic growth, right? So I'll also say something controversial here, so cover your ears if you're not up for that.
No, please.
I personally think that multicast is a very interesting solution, like intellectually solves for a lot of problems in terms of resource usage, but it's not commercially really ready to take off. Okay. And so I look at it as a way of saying, well, multicast solves some of the peakiness problem, yes, but it only works for part of the time when the traffic is high concurrency, for part of the traffic. Yes. So that means that I would have to deploy an infrastructure which gets used twice a week. Yes. And that is a cost. That is money that I have to put into that solution, to enable the network, to make the licensing work. And I have a short example. So let's say we have a 10 tera peak, right? Of that peak, we will definitely have a baseline which is still going to be the VOD traffic. So that's non-multicastable. So that means that for example, for 40%, so for 4 tera of traffic, I'm going to have CDN deployed, right? So then I have to keep another technology stack on the side for the multicastable traffic, which is going to cover the 6 tera. And I have to run these two in parallel, which are two different costs. And one is allowing me to use that infrastructure, which is CDN, which is generic and kind of agnostic for delivering any types of traffic. And the other one is allowing me to serve only multicastable traffic, which makes sense when concurrency is very high. So it is a cost.
Yes. So Xavier, in one sentence, can you please explain to this lady, by the way, she also speaks French, so you can do also French conversation, why you think multicast is still the best way to cope with any spike? Because the spike is one thing, but any spike is another thing. Like Tyson match, I can tell you, this was brutal.
Yeah, it's difficult to predict. I think that's the main thing, right? And I think Iuliana is right. It's not multicast only. Even in multicast ABR deployments, we rely on some unicast to start the stream or to do error correction. So it's combined. It's always unicast and multicast. I think where we are now is entering a different stage of scaling, right? You mentioned some of the numbers. We work with, the Indian Cricket League, for example, 75 terabits per second that have to be delivered. And this is where, in their network, they prefer unicast. So multicast is not, the single solution, I would say. But when you have high peaks and when you start getting into the hundreds of terabits per second, it's a way to make sure that your network won't be congested, right? So it depends how your network is architecture. We come across service providers who said multicast is not for me, and that's fine. But if you have multicast available in the network, which was the case of Telecom Italia, BT or Liberty Global, for example, we launched in Switzerland, we launched in the Netherlands. Using multicast, they can basically reduce those spikes of traffic. So it may not be for everyone. But
so that was a long sentence, huh?
Yeah, I know.
So, question number 2. What difference in terms of quality of experience were you able to measure versus the traditional CDN? And those are questions for Brendan and Diego, since you guys have hopefully measured the difference before and after.
So obviously we're still trialing Maud, but critically the customer experience is key, right? Because if we don't deliver a good customer experience, it doesn't matter whether we can scale the network or not. It has to be a good experience at the end of it. But critically, Maud is transparent to the end device, and so the ability to adapt to the prevailing network conditions outside of Maud is still there. So we will deliver as good an experience, and arguably, because we manage the bandwidth on the network for the multicast delivery, potentially a better experience by favouring the higher renditions, the higher quality delivery. In terms of our current delivery, which is all unicast apart from the trial, we know that we get good experience because we get that feedback from our content service providers, from our CDN partners, and from our own deliveries and our experience with BT Sports, where we developed a great understanding of what does good delivery look like, both from the network and the end user perspective. So from a Maud perspective, as good as, possibly better, subject to the ongoing work that we're doing on it.
Okay, Diego.
Yeah, that's basically on the same line. So we started with multicast ABR in production in 2021 with massive sports events. What we have seen, we have evolved from them, is a mature technology that is basically providing an advantage in terms of reduction of traffic. We are talking about roughly 84% of reduction of traffic for comparable unicast traffic with multicast. And we see also real and consistent increase in terms of quality of experience, because we see, for example, for a quite popular KPI, which is the rebuffering rate, values that are 10 times less than one on the unicast for every subscriber. And the same thing will happen also in terms of consumption of the content. So what we see that basically the customer using multicast ABR enjoy in a more stable and constant way the highest quality of the ladder for ABR with respect to those on unicast that basically experience from time to time switch back and forth from the quality, from one quality to the other, which is quite annoying. And there's of course benefits in terms of less congestion and offload of CDN. In this case, is our CDN, so it's an additional value, and of course backbone and access network.
So for you, it's no-brainer?
It's not, well, if can be used and it makes sense to be used,
yes,
it delivers real advantages. It's not the only way to do that.
You have multiple.
So you need to combine things and use them when it makes sense and when there is an advantage.
That's why I put you next to Union. So Xavier, we are going to give you the 2 minutes of glory. What have you measured across all your multicast ABR deployments in terms of traffic saving across the board, of course, quality of experience? What are the key numbers you could share today?
Yeah, so the number I think Diego shared, the 84%, is about what we see on average between 80 and 90%. So 84, 85 is about right. That's a big reduction, obviously, through the network. Obviously, the traffic still has to travel from your the edge of your network to your device, right? So this traffic remains the same. But then from that point across, the region and the core of the network, you can expect massive gains. So this 85% mark is about right. The big, I think, figures we published, I think that was probably 6 months ago, maybe a little bit more. That was with DAZN in Spain. So that was Orange in Spain, basically comparing the DAZN delivery from global CDNs and multicast ABR. And they had some really interesting numbers. They were dividing rebuffering rates by 4. Right? So
you say 10, you say 4?
So that was 4, yeah. Okay. Again, every network is different. It depends, on the device you use. It depends, it's a broad sort of remit, I would say.
This is on your website? The report?
Might be.
Okay. Still under embargo. So reporters, Tommy is in the room, no? Okay, anyway.
And error rates as well was the interesting one, right? Making sure that you have fewer errors because multicast is more stable.
So let me ask you a question, Xavier. Have you ever seen an operator who tried multicast ABR telling you, we tried it, it's not a good idea?
So there can be complexities when it comes to integrating into your devices, your CPEs. And we've seen operators with a very broad range of CPEs, maybe even some consumer CPEs, so people buying a CPE and it's not a managed CPE.
CPE is a gateway or?
Yeah, broadband, broadband. Your Wi-Fi router, if you like. So if you go and buy your Wi-Fi router, if it's not managed, of course it's going to be harder to integrate. You also seen a lot of operators basically growing through acquisition. So, 2, 3, 4 companies getting together, making the CPE part more diverse. But generally, once you find a way to test it, and typically it's with the new devices, they see the benefits.
Okay. Thank you, Xavier.
Can I add
yes,
something
please.
to that?
Yes, you can.
We've taken a look at multicast, and yes, the complexity of the client is something that has put us off a bit, so to speak. And the other problem that we are noticing, which is not yet been solved as far as I know, is how do we deal with dynamic ad insertion?
So that's a question for Xavier.
Money problem.
Xavier, dynamic ad insertion, how does it fit in the overall multicast ABR?
Yeah, so there are different ways of doing it. The simplest one is to basically have your football game, for example, delivered with multicast. And when you get to the ad break, you switch to unicast. So you do have a spike of traffic. But in this case, you also have ads that are typically more compressed than the live video because it's an on-demand piece of content, so your spike is lower. You don't do targeted advertising on 100% of the streams, so you don't get 100% of the peak of traffic. And we're working on ways to basically cache some of the ads in advance inside your home gateway, so that when you get to the ad is already available. So there are ways to work around that.
So maybe a segue on the ad discussion. So in the Super Bowl 2025, there was 0 targeted advertisement, all broadcast-based. And the only one who's doing at-scale targeting advertisement in the US for live sports is Amazon Prime with 15 million peak sessions, which is a good number. All the rest, they don't do because they know it might break. So watch for the innovation. Sometimes at scale, it doesn't work. Talking about scaling, Alex, we get a bit out of the CDN horse, and we are going to touch a bit of the platform itself, compression, streaming, advertisement. So what are you seeing among your content provider clients that will drive the network demand?
So what our customers are asking for, I think there are 3 main trends that we can mention. There's across the world more and more streaming. We've seen it yesterday with the record in cricket in India, 60 million concurrent viewers. It's probably the 2nd biggest number in the world. So there is more and more people watching streaming content, live sports, personalized content. So personalization is also an area that has an impact on the downstream network. And I'll take a few examples because you asked me for concrete figures.
We want the numbers.
Yeah, you want the number. So a platform that we deployed in 2021 in the US is Bally Sports, now called FanDuel. They go from 40 linear channels to 240 channel variants. So based on where you are in the US, you could watch the same channel than another person, but you would get content that is different. So there is content replacement, and then there is targeted ads. So individual people will get targeted ads, and so that content targeted and ad targeted, and the fact that it's kind of a unique feed per user, even if it's optimized with caching on the CDN side, with Delta playlist reducing the size of the manifest, it does have an impact on the load and the traffic. And then more and more live sports. And so I'll take another example, which is Peacock in the US. I take US examples because this is where we see the biggest scale. We've helped them do the Paris Olympics. And so it's 4,000 live events during the Olympics. It's up to 300 events per day, up to 69 concurrent events, and peaks at 25,000 requests per second. So it's really huge. And for this, you need to build an architecture on the media processing side that is highly scalable, leveraging cloud, but you also need to build a multi-CDN architecture that can cope with this. Mm-hmm. And so still focusing on Peacock, we helped them do a record in the US, 16.3 million concurrent viewers during the NFL wildcard a year ago. And so 16.3 times 9 megabit per second is 146 terabyte per second. Terabit per second. So it's really huge, and indeed you need to be able to architect scalability on the media processing and on the network CDN side.
So the second question on the supply side, which is your side, what is happening on the video processing that could reduce the burden on the network? Because I understand it's easy to put more caching, but one of my favorite topics when I was at Harmonic is how can we reduce the traffic? So tell us what are the secrets of video processing to reduce the traffic?
It's true that when you think about scalability, it doesn't just start at the CDN. It starts at the media processing level because you can optimize a lot of things that then will have a downstream impact. There are a lot of features. I'll focus on 2 areas, but we could talk about just-in-time packaging, new codecs, CMAF. So one main feature that I think you like is content-aware encoding. It's something that
what is it?
So it's something that we have started to work on, I think, 7-8 years ago. So it's leveraging AI. At that time, it was machine learning, and we're still training the models to optimize it. So the idea is to simplify the video itself reducing the weight, but without impacting the subjective video quality. So you keep a high video quality, but you reduce the amount of storage needed to store a VOD asset, and you reduce the amount of bandwidth that are needed to stream a live content. And right now, this is something we deploy. I think 2,000 of our customers are using that technology, half of them, including some of your colleagues, Juliana. And the impact is actually quite huge because you can reduce the CDN bandwidth by roughly between 30 and 40%. So in the end, at the end of the month, it has a huge impact on the CDN bill.
And maybe you forgot to say something. It works on existing deployed devices. You don't need to change the hardware.
It's fully standard with any player, any device.
Yeah.
And all the work is done at the processing level without additional resource consumption. So,
so for our sustainability friends,
indeed,
it's a technique that doesn't need to change the device. I know it's a bit revolutionary, but you should never forget about the fact you can improve the performance of a whole service without touching the device. Thank you, Alex. Now, question I want, since we are in London, I want to throw a curveball on the UK plan to switch off BBC by 2030. I will start with you, Brendan.
DTT.
DTT, not DTC. It's moving from DTC. It's moving from DTT to DTC. So it's going to be like you probably know Freely, which is now a free OTT streaming of a UK DTT channel. So Brendan, tell us, what do you think about this idea? How the network is ready, and can you project from your perspective by when this might happen? 3 questions.
I think I'm not sure 2030 is the date, but we know that government and the regulators have already started asking the questions that inform when that date might be. I think the license expiry is currently 2034. But in terms of readiness, other than the fact we have maybe 9 years to think about it, there is a lot of work to do through the entire ecosystem. Not just scaling the content delivery, but also broadband availability. If we are going to switch off DTT, we need to ensure that broadband is ubiquitously available to the entire country, or at least to the part of the country that already have DTT available to them. And there's a lot of positive benefit from driving those activities in terms of broader online capabilities, such as remote Medicare, and there is a lot of benefit to be had if TV does switch off DTT in the way that we anticipate it will, in terms of driving that broadband ubiquity. So that's a real positive. In terms of our readiness from a content delivery perspective, there's a lot of work to do. The spikes that we saw on Colin's graph earlier will only get bigger for live events if there isn't the DTT network.
So maybe one data point for people who live in UK. I always like to compare what is the OTT ratio versus broadcast. I think on the top soccer match, we are at 30% of broadcast is watched on BBC iPlayer, for example. So when we reach 100%, you can see it's a lot of network.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we have IP-only events today from the likes of Amazon that are driving, today well over 30 terabits of traffic over our networks. We anticipate that will scale. I mean, in the absence of technologies like Maud, improvements in encoding, that is going to scale 4 or 5 times at least over the coming decade. And we have to use that time wisely to explore innovations like Maud and the full ecosystem, including encoding, to look at how we optimize and deliver that in a sustainable way as well.
So you are confident for 9 years from here?
Ask me in 9 years' time, but I mean, I think we have time to develop, to grow, to innovate. Are we ready today? No. Can we be ready for a date that is 9 years in the future? I think
9 years,
we can.
but do you think 2030 is realistic, or you think it's more?
I'm not sure where 2030 comes from.
Type of curveball, we say I'm going to take over Canada tomorrow.
I mean, at the point at which a decision is made, clearly the business side of this, in terms of what is the investment needed to achieve that change, also has to be considered.
Okay.
And so I think there's a balance. It's not just about the technology. It's about what does that mean for the country, for all of the ISPs, for all of the content providers that will be involved in that. So
So
yes, there's a lot of work to do.
yeah,
We need to understand where the decision making is likely to head as well.
but it looks like the train has left the station. It's not a question of if, it's more when.
When and how. Yes.
How,
yes.
I assume you have
Yes.
ideas
Yes.
how to do that.
Yes.
Juliana, same question for you. Are you confident about the DTT switch off on your network, not on BT's network?
If it's in 2030, no.
No, okay.
But
about,
I don't think it will be in 2030.
How about more time? Do you have
Yeah,
enough time
probably.
to scale your network?
We're also looking at satellite switch off for Sky specifically. So
Yeah.
the broadband side is going to have to take on both the
Yeah.
IP flows that are coming from the DTT switch off and from
Mm-hmm.
the satellite turn off.
I have a technology for that.
And to Xavier's remark here, I'll say that I personally, again, believe more in tremendous efficiencies and revolutionary optimizations on the encoding side, rather than
She's already a customer. So it's not
rather than people agreeing on a single multicast flavor. Because for us, for example, on the Sky side, it wouldn't make sense if we turn on multicast just for our own traffic. We need Amazon to buy into this. We need Netflix to buy into this. We need everybody to align. So I think getting people to agree on the internet about a specific standard specifically about multicast is going to be way more complicated, more of a headache than it is to put some effort behind better encoding. Also, encoding, it's a decision that you make on your own. You need the server and the client, right?
So Diego is telling you he has multiple recipe and he's going to do a little of this, a little of that.
Yeah, we already actually started some work in DVB, for example, with the latest that you know very well, standard version of the multicast ABR
Yes.
solution, trying to define an interoperable horizontal profile for multicast ABR.
Yes.
So that can be implemented and can provide, let's say, a solid set of functionalities to the service provider. So
Interoperability, yeah. Just to
it
be
will
clear,
evolve, but
Mode was, so BT was part of the DVB multicast ABR group. You decided to do a fork at some time, but maybe we'll bring you back. Okay, this is my phone telling me I have to
5 minutes. Yeah.
5 minutes.
I mean that is the advantage of Maud, is that you don't need to do an operator-specific integration, because the Maud technology is transparent to the CSP and to the client.
Okay.
So if we can gain the video encoding benefits and then take a further 80% plus
Okay.
of the traffic using multicast,
Yeah,
you get a double whammy. So actually, there is a real benefit, business benefit there.
and the idea is, if we are able to provide a single solution that works globally for all the OTT, that's really something that becomes
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah,
Because
transparency,
everyone-
not integration, custom integration.
Exactly.
Maybe they will teach you how to work less.
I mean, I used to go to the ITF, and in the world of standards, I am very cynical about people agreeing on a multicast
Sometimes
flavor.
Okay,
So,
we-
let's talk again in 9 years.
We'll make a break on this one. So we have 5 more minutes. I want to ask last question, which is open to all the panelists. We have talked about edge unicast, multicast ABR. What other technique do you have in mind in 3 years? Do you dream about open caching, peer-to-peer? What are the techniques you would like to see moving faster from the market point of view?
Well, from my point of view, I think that the way to adaptively use unicast and multicast ABR, and the idea of mutualize the caching and traffic capacity with open caching is the way to follow, I mean, to invest in. One important thing is that, as I said, we need to combine the technology. There is not one single recipe that will work for every scenario. We need to be able to adapt.
Not one recipe, at least 3, 4, or 5.
Yeah, and we need to be able to dynamically switch, maybe in an autonomous way in the network, from one way to deal with one technology to the other, depending, for example, as you said, if traffic makes sense, because there is a peak on demand for a live event, then I can switch to multicast ABR. Yeah. If it doesn't make sense from a capacity point of view, I can simply rely on CDN and in unicast. That's, I think, is one of the scenarios that for the evolution is really promising.
Any other opinion?
I want to mention the initiative at the SVTA. So my parent company, Comcast, are putting forward a group at the Streaming Video Tech Alliance, which is looking at providing a infrastructure that will allow you to put containerized caches in the network, deep in the network. So instead of having a particular cache of Netflix or Amazon Prime, what you can do is bring your containerized caching image, and then you will use this infrastructure, which can be turned up and down for various needs, and whoever has the peak that week can use that infrastructure. But again, it's a trade-off of not being close to the hardware. It's a trade-off of like how willing are you to forego a bit of that performance from being close to the hardware to being deeper in the network. So this is something worth looking at, I think.
Question, is that documented on the SVTA website, or is it on the dark web of few people who know about things?
It is at the moment in some people's heads.
Okay.
I don't think the SVTA has a document put forward, but yeah. People are working on it. There's a lot of security, like IP address management, and like these little quirks
of course,
to be
we
sorted.
need engineers. It doesn't work on PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Okay.
BT is also looking at virtualized CDNs, so it sounds like we should have a deeper conversation.
Yeah.
there.
Now we have a consensus between the two. That's good.
Oh, that's true.
Alex.
What would you like to see moving faster? Redundancy, SLA, is it a problem? Are we on the right track, or we are still learning?
So more AI to optimize what is above and upstream of the network, but I think there's something an aspect that is very important when it comes to scalability is resiliency, is the ability to build architecture that can actually support potential failures. And so when we talk about scalability, we usually talk about cloud. And moving to the cloud, some workflow, doesn't mean you benefit from the scalability by default. You need to really build something that is cloud native, that can leverage the orchestration. And we have deployed throughout the years. Right now, I think we use 40,000 cloud nodes across the world for more than 150 customers. And we're seeing node failures every day. And so when you want to leverage the big scalability that the cloud provides, you really need to design an architecture around those failures. And so that's why we built some geo-redundant architecture where we are able to deploy one video pipeline on one availability zone, geo-sync with another availability zone, even in 2 different clouds. And so we can provide to the network and the CDN the ability to seamlessly switch from one path to another and provide the highest uptime. And that's how last year we reached a 97% uptime. And so, yeah, leveraging the cloud, okay, but leveraging it with a design that can cope with failures.
Yes. Sam, do we have time for 1 or 2 questions? One question. So who has a smart question to ask? Is it a smart one?
I don't know. We'll find out. My question is around CapEx investment. So I think we've spoken about virtualized CDN. Someone still ultimately needs to pay for the infrastructure that capacity is going to sit on. And we've spoken about multicast distributions, I think, and multicast over unicast capabilities. Most of the examples I think we've heard about are where there have been existing multicast networks in play. So my question is really, how do you see the CapEx investment process working for organizations, say, that don't have that multicast network in play? And sort of a similar question for the virtualized CDN. How is all this going to work? Because I think the big challenge here is not that we can't technically solve them by scaling the network. It's the investment costs. So it's kind of, I think, a question to you two primarily.
So this is a loaded question, by the way. It's not a smart, it's a loaded question.
So I guess by singling out people that do not have yet a multicast-enabled infrastructure, I'm being called here to provide the answers. So the way we've taken a look at it is, in order to support multicast right now, it would mean that we would have to deploy X amount of terabits per second extra CDN, right? So that means that if I need to put a multicast solution in place now, it would be the equivalent of buying this capacity of standalone CDN, which I could probably use for other types of traffic. So that means that I either need like a big hardware refresh at some point where 10 terabits is wiped out and I need to replace it right now. So I'm at an inflection point and I'm like, do I invest in 10 terabits that can do multicast, or do I invest in 10 terabits that can do any type of traffic on the caches? And so we're not at that stage yet. We don't have 10 terabits that are going out of end of life anytime soon. So for us, it's a matter of we would have to have double the investment on both the CDN edges, which support VOD and any other type of traffic, versus the multicast one. So the CapEx is a problem, yes. This is why it's not taken off for us.
Yeah. Okay. Sam?
I was after about the native multicast ones as well.
Yeah.
The CapEx investment there as well.
Yeah. So investing in multicast, if you have multicast in place, is relatively cheap, right? That's not a big investment. What I would say, maybe to bounce on what Iuliana just said, is getting easier to get high throughput out of servers, right? We now have a single 2U servers able to do 1 terabits per second, right? So building multiple terabits per second of capacity is getting easier, and we think this is going to continue to grow. So it's finding the balance, right? And I would say some networks we talked about, India, Reliance building, I think about 12 terabits in the network today. It's done with servers that do about 400 gigabits per second. That's how they wanted to size it. But it becomes really easy to deploy high capacity in a few places. So I think it's going to get easier. That's the way I look at it.
Very, very quickly, when BT first looked to roll out multicast, we also did the financial analysis of where is the tipping point between unicast and multicast. It's surprisingly a low number of viewers where multicast actually costs in end to end. So it's worked for us well for the last 15 years.
But I must say, as a conclusion, some operators like DT, for example, they decided to unplug the multicast network to move to unicast because they do not believe in live big events. They believe more in on-demand type, and of course, they want to be able to scale the Netflix, the Amazon, which is another panel conversation. Who is going to drive the traffic and the audience?
For next year.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Got it on the agenda
next
for
year you will
2026.
invite me, Sam, for continuation of the conversation. So I hope you enjoyed the discussion, very vivid panel. So please applaud my panelists.